Well, Pierre Poilievre may have lost his seat in the House of Commons, but Conservative caucus members, both new and old, are backing his leadership.
Pierre Poilievre should absolutely continue to lead the party. And obviously, we didn't get the result we wanted, but we definitely had a strong base of support.
I think the support he has from caucus, which is quite visible if you go on any social media, I think that's a sign that people believe that he can, continue to grow this party and grow this coalition.
A lot of people that voted for me voted for change. They voted for Pierre Poilievre. Youth were voting for him. Young voters were voting for him.
I've never seen anyone work harder in my life. We need to build on the progress that Pierre's already made.
Conservatives gained 24 seats in Monday's election, many in battleground Ontario. So will that be enough to save Poilievre's job? I want to bring in our panel of veteran parliamentary journalists. Mia Rabson is Deputy Parliamentary Bureau Chief at the Canadian Press. She's joining us remotely because she's headed to the Battle of Ontario, the Sens versus Leafs tonight, and that is a pretty good excuse. Bob Fife is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail, and Joël-Denis Bellavance is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for La Presse. It's good to see you all. I can't believe the election is over. Those seats are still flipping even today. Bob, do you think the Conservatives are going to flip their leader, or do you think Pierre Poilievre has done enough, even without the big win, without winning a seat? He got the vote share up and he got the seat count up. What do you think?
That's a good question, and I think it's something we have to watch and see how it develops. You're starting to see, for example, that members of Parliament are fed up with the controlling tactics that was Mr. Poilievre imposed upon them for a couple of years. They're now appearing on your show, and we'll have to watch on Tuesday whether they're willing to talk to journalists again, because, as you know, they were not allowed to talk to us, and I think that is going to be changing. It depends on how Mr. Poilievre handles the caucus. And it also depends on how the party feels about it, because, you've got MPs talking to you and saying how they support him. But privately, you have MPs that have told me that they found it really difficult going door to door, because a lot of people were saying, we like some of the policies you're doing, but we think your leader's a dick. And we really, and we think he is. I'm sorry, but that's what they're telling me.
All right, I'm gonna have some ombudsman's paperwork to fill out before I go home tonight, I think. But yes, not in such language, but I have heard similar sentiments expressed from Conservative candidates.
So that's why I'm saying yes. Initially, he may be able to handle this for a little while, but I think we really have to reserve judgment to see how he handles that caucus and see how the party feels about him.
Yeah, Mia, we are on cable, so it's okay. What are your thoughts on what's going to happen? I know they start the conversation on Tuesday, figuring out the Reform Act, a process then of, getting to an interim leader. But, it's the longer-term question that matters.
For sure. I am interested to see what they do with that on Tuesday when the caucus meets. I mean, this was the caucus that did vote for that Reform Act before. It's worth noting the Liberals didn't, and they had trouble getting rid of Justin Trudeau as a result of that. So I wonder if all of the caucuses will avail themselves of this tool. If they don't, I think that's a big sign that they have no interest in getting rid of Mr. Poilievre. I suspect they will opt to take it because they have before. It's also worth noting that we're in this sort of post-election happy period for some, maybe not so happy for those who lost. But they're sort of gathering steam. They're circling the wagons around Mr. Poilievre right now, and then they have lots to be glad about. I mean, if he hadn't been up 25 points in the polls 3 months ago, this would have been a great election result for them to win another 24 seats. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time for things to percolate. I agree with Bob. It really depends on how he handles the caucus. If he doesn't give them a bigger role and a little bit more independence to speak, that's the kind of stuff that will start to percolate and cause problems. And it is probably worth noting that it did not happen overnight when Andrew Scheer lost, that he was moved out of the leadership role. It did not happen overnight with Aaron O'Toole either. It took time. So this is a different situation than either of those two. Mr. Poilievre probably has a much better chance than those two did to stay on long term. But my point is the days are still young, and his future is not yet certain, despite what they're saying right now.
Yeah, JD, I remember the leaks about Scheer starting pretty aggressively and pretty quickly, and you could sense that O'Toole's days were numbered because, of the climate plan and different things and the shift from the way he won the leadership. Poilievre didn't shift, right? And he stuck. Maybe that's the mistake. But what's your sense? Do you think he can hold on? Does he have to get rid of some of his staff and some of his people? What's your thoughts?
There's usually a spring cleanup that has to be made after an election, and that's going to happen also within the Conservative Party. But My sense is that Mr. Poilievre is in good shape to keep his job, but the challenge is to get a seat quickly in the House of Commons, because that's where he can rally the troops on a daily basis. If he's away from the House of Commons works, people maybe start to chat. Maybe we can get move on from Mr. Poilievre. He's not there to impose discipline and messages and all that. So his challenge is to find somebody who will give up his seat quickly, so that he could have a by-elections quickly, so that by September he can be in the House of Commons again to interact with Mr. Carney. That's the challenge.
If Carney gives him an early by-election.
Exactly.
I mean, we don't know yet. I'm sure the Prime Minister will be asked about that tomorrow when he speaks at 11. But what's your sense, JD, about how quickly he might find somewhere to run, who might give up a seat? I mean, what are you thinking?
Well, he needs a volunteer, and that's the challenge to find. He's making a lot of phone calls to make sure that short support for his leadership. But something that I wrote about today, and that I think we need to put on the record. There is a sense that Mr. Poilievre has three options where he could run, either in Alberta, Calgary, or Edmonton, in the National Capital Region, Pembroke, or the riding of Scott Reed, or, and some people are pushing that idea very strongly in Quebec, in the Beauce. And they
Max Bernier's old seat.
Yes, and there's a new MP there, and he just got elected. So there's a movement afoot, a small one, but still in Quebec and city, that want Mr. Poilievre to run there, because it's east of Ontario that the Conservative needs to make some gains. There is 110 seats if you include Atlantic Canada and Quebec. And the Conservative, since it was created in 2004, only won at the max 20 seats out of 110. So that's the void they need to fill.
Bob, what do you think?
Well, I think he still has some troubles here, because the Liberals are trying to pick off MPs to see if they can get over the 172 margin. Obviously, they are talking to some Conservatives, or hoping they can talk to some Conservatives. They're obviously talking to the NDP. So that will undermine his leadership if they lose some Conservatives to help the Liberals become a majority government. He also faces a mandatory leadership review, which will happen in the fall. And that leaves a lot of time for people if they, and look, this is a divided party. And look what's happened with Tim Houston and Doug Ford. There's lots of opportunity here for potentially people to vote him out in a leadership review. I understand that he's trying to see if he can do this review in the summer months to avoid the longer the period this drags on, the more potential threats to his leadership. And then the other thing is this discussion of what you do with Jenny Byrne. I mean, a lot of Conservatives want the campaign manager to be ousted, to get rid of her. And I'm hearing that maybe he wants to do that too. And she's not going to go out without a fight, because that's Jenny Byrne.
Right.
So we're in an area where we have to see how much infighting takes place over the next little while. And the more infighting, as you know, the greater the opportunity, or the greater the difficulty of handing on to a leadership.
Yeah, and Mia, if it goes that way with the Conservatives, who, they lead the league in regicide, as I like to say, it's not going to be people signing a letter asking the Prime Minister to reconsider his position like the Liberals did, right? It's going to be a little bit more knifey, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, they've got experience doing this. They know how to do it. And on Tuesday, they likely will vote themselves the ability to do it if they decide that they want to. And, to Bob's point, there are many pitfalls that Mr. Poilievre has to overcome in the next several months. If the Liberals somehow manage to eke another 4 seats now out of this Parliament and get a majority, it gives them a little bit more runway as Conservatives to figure this out. But right now we are in a minority government situation, so they also don't necessarily have a ton of time to get their act together and figure out what they want to do, because we're going to have a spring session of Parliament. It's going to be sort of a bit of a housekeeping session, get a few things done quickly. But the fall is when it's really going to start again. And Mr. Poilievre has to be able to prove by the fall that he is in control of the party. And so there's going to have to be changes made. There are lots of people within the party that want to see changes made. Ms. Byrne's departure is one of those changes that a lot of people are asking for, but that may not be enough for some. And 4 or 5 months down the road, we also will have a sense of what kind of Prime Minister Mr. Carney is going to be.
This is true.
If he starts to lead the Liberals up in the polls, if people are liking what they're seeing, that also might be more of a challenge for Mr. Poilievre going forward.
I don't know, JD, like Bob has mentioned this, that you hear the whispers of reaching across, trying to get people to come over and join join the Liberals to get them to that majority? I mean, how likely do we think this might be at this point? I was talking to a few Conservatives, and they're like, I haven't heard it. You know, they didn't call me. I should be offended, maybe. But like, well, what's your sense of where that is?
To succeed, Mr. Carney has to put something on the plate so that it becomes attractive, so that MPs to cross the floor, because there would be an uproar. I remember the last time that it did happen. That was David Emerson that was appointed to cabinet. He was just elected in Vancouver, and Mr. Harper gave a post in the cabinet.
Was he industry minister? Is that what they gave him? It was a pretty big one, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that would be something that could also lead to division within the Liberal Party. There are a lot of people who have been waiting for a while to get a cabinet post. And if Mr. Carney decides on one day, okay, I'll give that to a Tory MP from XYZ province, that may cause him internal problems. Mr. Carney does not need that. As Mia mentioned, we're going to find out with every Canadian how Mr. Carney will be as Prime Minister. We haven't seen him in action in Parliament. Will he make mistakes? He can't afford to make mistakes with his own troops because he has a minority government.
Yeah, but Bob, it's a durable minority if you look at it, right? Like, I know it dropped down to 168 seats, and there's still the Terra Nova and the Peninsula's riding to go to a recount in Newfoundland and Labrador because it's 12 votes, right? So that could flip too. But even so, with a Conservative, a party figuring out what's next with its leader not in the House, with the NDP smashed, and the Bloc wouldn't seem keen to go back. I mean, they can expect a year, 2 years. Probably
easily. In fact, you heard the Bloc Québécois leader say earlier this week that until negotiations are completed with the United States, that Parliament needs to have stability, and the leaders should work together to make sure that the government isn't defeated. You can still be an opposition party, still oppose, without bringing down the threat of an election. And I think I think we're into a safe period of time.
Yeah, and it might be a period where the country wants that kind of opposition rather than the high games, silliness we've seen for the past year or so.
Right.
But what's your sense on the floor crossings? How real do you think this is? Like, would it need to be like 4 all at once to get you there? Could there be 1 or 2 here, or is it just something that's just in the ether right now?
No, I think discussions are being held. I mean, the Liberals don't even want to talk about it, and I'm sure you're hearing the same thing. So, look, I think it's real, but whether you get anybody enticed to do so, and, even if you have 1 or 2, that's enough to frighten everybody else away too, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have to have somebody sitting in cabinet as well. I mean, you can. There are other positions: parliamentary secretary, chairmanship of committees, and maybe a promise of a Senate seat as we get closer to the next election campaign.
Yeah. Well, doing the cynical math, you need 3, and then you could have an opposition speaker.
Right.
That could get you there, right?
I know for a fact the Liberals tried in the past to convince Alexandre Boulris, the NDP MP, the lone NDP MP in Quebec, to cross the floor and join the Liberal Party. Mr. Boulris confirmed that to me. Mélanie Joly was the one who was trying to convince him. So, depending on the future of the NDP, maybe Mr. Boulris will be interested, but he needs to get something in return. And what will the Liberals be willing to give in return for Mr. Boulris to come aboard? So that's the big question. I'm sure that Mr. Boulris is not alone in that camp within the NDP. So I think the first probably group that would be, possibly reaching out to or thinking about crossing the floor will be the NDP, and I would watch one of them, Alexandre Boulris, again.
Well, there's some Conservative MPs from Quebec who are not big fans of Mr. Poilievre.
They've been closing the ranks behind Mr. Poilievre over the last few years since he became leader. I haven't heard any rumblings publicly. They're going to meet Friday, tomorrow, the Quebec caucus, privately to discuss the future of the party. So we'll see what comes out of that meeting. But that's the plan right now within the Conservative Party. But there are still some MPs and people in Quebec who say Mr. Poilievre should run in Quebec in the by-election to get a seat in the House of Commons.
What a weird political year it's been. I mean, Mia, Mia, what's your sense of whether, defections could get the Liberals to the minority when Ontario could not?
I mean, I'm not going to say anything is impossible in politics these days, because it seems that anything that you could possibly think of is still, that you might think could happen, is going to happen in this country, or at least in the world right now. The main point I would make is 4 seats is a lot, or 3 or 4 people to cross. If it was 1 or 2, it would probably be doable. Four, I mean, even though it seems like a small number, it is a lot that you have to give 4 different people to cross the floor and sit with your caucus. I don't know that there's really any appetite though for any kind of more sort of formal coalition, or not coalition, but agreement with the NDP again. That didn't really work out necessarily for either party the last time, in terms of where Canadians viewed it at the end of the day. But those are also discussions that are ongoing. But they have stability. They don't necessarily have to have this happen right now. So if they don't come back at the end of May into Parliament with a majority government, that doesn't mean 6 months to a year from now they haven't then been able to convince those people to come over. And some of that depends, for the NDP in particular, how their rebuild starts.
Remember, David, there are by-elections in the life of a parliament, and that, the Liberals would also, maybe win some seats through that way. So if they perform well in the eyes of Canadians, if they get the right policies at the right time, if they do well with Donald Trump and get the tariffs out of the window, this could, bring political dividends in the future, in future by-elections. There are by-elections in the life of Parliament, as I say, and this could be an opportunity for the Liberals maybe to jump over that 172 seats.
I wonder, we only got a couple of minutes left. Bob, we're going to hear from the Prime Minister tomorrow to give his sense of priorities and early agenda. What do you expect to hear from Mark Carney at 11 o'clock tomorrow?
Well, we're obviously going to try to delve a little deeper into what he hopes to get out of the negotiations with President Trump. I don't think he'll hold his cards pretty close to his chest, but I think one of the things that we need to hear from him for sure is how he's going to respond to growing Western alienation, particularly in Saskatchewan and Alberta. We haven't heard much from. He talked about energy corridors and making Canada a super energy powerhouse, but we need a little more details, because one of the things he probably should have done almost immediately is get on a plane and go and talk to Premier Moe and Smith, because that is a real powder keg here. And we really need to find out from the Prime Minister how he intends to deal with that.
They can all meet down in Mar-a-Lago. He can start that. He can start USMCA and he can do the Western stuff at the same time. Mia, 30 seconds on what you think we're going to see tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, the negotiations with Trump are key for him. That's what he ran on. That's what people voted him in for. He's the one that people thought was going to be able to handle this the best, and he's got to start showing some results pretty quickly on that front. But there's also a lot of questions about, what do you expect in your cabinet? Who are you going to be prioritizing? And you have a lot of things that you're promising to do, including internal trade barriers. So yes, absolutely, he should absolutely immediately or very quickly have a meeting with the premiers, if not individually, then at least as a group.
It's curious to see, he's going to be so focused on Trump, who his main domestic lieutenant is. Maybe it's Freeland, maybe it's LeBlanc. I don't know. JD, your quick thoughts on what we're going to see.
I'll be we'll be watching whether Mr. Carney is willing to call a by-election quickly for Mr. Poilievre. That's an issue that has to be solved, because he's the leader of the Conservative Party, who's the official opposition. So I think courtesy would command that he would give him the opportunity to enter the House or re-enter the House quickly. So that would be a question that we ask. And also, how are we doing financially? Because the economy is going into a slump. How is that going to affect the budget that he plans to table?
Such a weird election. I know, Pierre Poilievre started this wanting to move out of Stornoway, but not because he lost his seat.
We're still not sure whether he can live in Stornoway.
Yeah, no, he can't. It's a question of how quickly he has to go. I mean, Peter Julian said you got 20 days to clue up your office. Maybe that applies here. I don't know. We can't get the answer. All right, I want to thank you all. Mia Rabson, Joël-Denis Bellavance, and Bob Fife.